Hello and welcome to another episode of Future Learners. My name is Brett Campbell. I am the Chairman and CEO of Euka Future Learning, and I'm joined again, you guessed it, by the one and only, the founder and head of education, Ellen Brown. Hello, Ellen.
Hello, Brett.
So today we're going to talk about a topic that is pretty close to my heart, and I'll, pardon the pun, that'll make sense in a minute. So I want to talk about something that we have not dived into yet, and it sort of dawned upon me that it's interesting that we haven't talked about it yet. We're at about episode 14 or so, 15 of the show, and we've definitely covered the topic of mental health. There's obviously lots to discuss there, and I think it's a topic that we will and need to continually talk about as well. But we haven't talked about the topic of physical health, right? Our body and what we're doing as, homeschooling, and when we're educating and learning and developing, what are we doing physically? Because I personally, I say, cut my teeth in the let's call it the business world. And, in 2008, I started a health and fitness company, and we grew that to be one of the biggest fitness companies in the country at the time. And I was obsessed about health. I was obsessed about making sure we're getting the right nutrition, we're getting the right physical outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So I love this topic, and it's one that we don't talk about near enough. I mean, and not just in this podcast, but in general. And it's probably because food is just too damn tasty, that nasty, dirty food, a lot of it, right? So I'll start by saying I'm absolutely human, and this episode is not about sit down and eat carrots and lettuce and so forth. This is more about bringing to the awareness of how do we, inside our homeschooling plan, which if you haven't checked out our last episode, where we actually went into a pretty deep dive with that episode 13, I believe it is, where Ellen and I talked about the setting yourself up for success as a homeschooler, everything from the macro all the way down to the micro, into the week, the day, the lesson, etc. And this sort of feeds into all of that, because physical exercise and mental exercise should be incorporated into your, let's call it your termly, your weekly, your daily curriculum per se. So the reason why I think it's important is, the general schooling system, one thing that it really does have going for it is the structure, okay? So in most schooling systems, there will always be a 30 to 60 minute time slot for physical work, whether it's running around, you're playing games, or you're doing something. That's already built in. So it's almost like a forced byproduct of the system itself. It does have lunch breaks, it does have interval breaks, etc., which does by proxy, force you to be aware that, hey, you should be eating something during this period. What can happen with homeschooling, I know, and when you sort of got the world at your feet and you're controlling your own day and paradigm, you can quickly forget those things. Things could be pushed out a few extra hours. We don't have the right nutrition. We don't have any nutrition in us because we haven't eaten for so long. And I'm like this myself. I can quite often go into a cave of work, and I can do 6-7 hours, and oh my God, I haven't even eaten yet, right? Or I haven't drunk any water today. It's like, oh my goodness, like I know by just proxy of me drinking water, I will have more mental clarity in the work that I'm actually doing. I'll get better results out of. So I want to talk about that, and I'd love to get your thoughts and any extra things that you can share as it relates to that. So before we dive in, what's your synopsis on that itself, the importance of the mental and the physical health and the intent that we need to have when we're applying it to our homeschooling journey?
I'm really glad that you brought this topic up, Brett, because as a homeschooling parent, probably one of the things that's most tricky is the fridge raids and the cupboard raids, because kids are at home. Everyone who was in COVID, obviously all of us, know what that's like, where you're just like, what am I doing now? Oh, just get some chips, And so there's a lot of that goes on with homeschooling. And so it's definitely something that homeschooling parents, when you're new to homeschooling, all of a sudden you've got to say to yourself, okay, we can't have a 24-hour snack time going here. And you don't want to be one of those, oh, ring the bell, it's recess. We don't want to be like that. But certainly being purposeful about, this is the shelf where you can snack from at any point, or this is the basket in the cupboard that is free choice for you. And then there's other things on a different shelf where it's only when it's the right time. Those kinds of things become really important in order to be able to, get those kind of outcomes that we're talking about, feeling good and confident and feeling good in our health.
Yeah, and it comes back again to the overarching theme of setting up the guidelines for success, right? It's interesting because I look at, and you talked about this in the last episode around, we have, most parents listening to this would have gone through the schooling system. You'd have 12 years of schooling, of structure, and it's really hard to break structure when you're used to something. It's like the smoker trying to give up smoking. They're no longer doing it for the smoke. They're doing it just because of the habit, right? It's like me. I have a coffee every morning, and I walked into my office this morning. I'm like, I'm going to try and reduce caffeine. I'm like, man, I just have it for a habit. Like, it's not like it does anything for me now. I don't get the caffeine hit per se, which again, another conversation about my adrenals, but maybe I'm having too much caffeine to keep myself alert. But again, this just highlights we are human here. However, so back to the having the rules and guidelines, because just because you are at home, right, it's very important that you distinguish the boundaries between home, your learning environment, your schooling environment, your playing environment, right, and your safe and sacred environment. I talk about this actually in my book, where we talk about the two key areas to develop is your support network and your surroundings, right? And there's 4 key surroundings that I sort of discuss in there. And one of those surroundings is your healing surrounding, right? Like, where do you go to for solace? Like, where is that place in your house that you could just go to and you can escape from the stresses, the frustration, the this, the that? So again, really important that we make sure we set up these environments within inside our house, or else what will happen is your schooling environment and you're telling your child off environment, you're having fun memories environment is all in one, and it just becomes a massive entangled web, right? It was like when COVID started, and the team had to go remote, and you get people turning up in the morning and you're like, are you wearing your pajamas? Like, because they're at home. It's like, that's not going to work. Like, it's not going to work for you because you haven't even started your day yet. You're still like rolled out of bed and you're working. It's like, you need to go and get dressed. You need to show up as if you're turning up to work, even though you're at home. And you need to walk out the door and you need to come back through the door with a working mindset. And I say this because this is very important for pattern interrupts to change your state and your environment in which you're in. Because there will be certain areas in your house that your child will be able to learn better in just due to the setup of the environment. So think about that as well. It's very, very important for the mental health aspect of, are we setting our child up for success? Are you putting your child into a real dark room with no windows and they're trying to learn? Maybe that is a zone where they can, because they work really well without distractions. I was no good at high school sitting by the window, even though that's where I always used to sit, because I just look out the window and daydream all day. So it's like, maybe I need to be moved. But anyway, it comes back to setting those boundaries, like you say. And the food one is such a big one that, again, you don't realize it till you're there. You're like, it's an unlimited pantry. But I wanted to ask you about this because I was talking to a friend the other day about this, and I'm a fairly new parent, and I have an upbringing of how I was raised, and we didn't come from much, and we always had a hot meal for dinner, and we always had a lunch as well. So it wasn't like I went without any options, but there was no sort of snacks for me. It's like if I was hungry in between meals, go and drink some water, or maybe have a piece of fruit if we had extra fruit. That was sort of my allowance there. So I find myself now where Ayla's like, oh, I'm hungry, I want a snack. I'm like, I feel my mother coming through me and going, no, you're not having any snacks. You can wait for dinner. It's like, what? Wait on a minute. So this comes back again to breaking our paradigms of how we've been brought up. One big one, and I think a lot of people relate to this, and I want to hand to you, is where if you don't finish your meal, so there was times I remember where I sat at dinner and I'm like shoving spinach down my mouth because I'm just like, I had to eat it or else I didn't get dessert, right? But I had it with spinach. I was like, I don't want any more spinach. Well, you're not getting any dessert if you don't eat your spinach. And I'm like, oh my God, I created such a bad relationship with spinach because that was like the final boss of the video game that I had to get through to get to my ice cream or my ice block if we had any there. And I'm finding myself, I'm doing that with Ayla, but I seen a friend do it, and he's like, before I had Ayla, his daughter was like, oh, I don't want that. I'd like this, please. And he went and made. I'm like, mate, he goes, mate, if she doesn't want to eat it, I'm not going to force her to eat it. She can eat something. I'm like, oh, good point. And it was just my own beliefs that were coming through. What speak to that? I mean, there's a lot there that I just sort of dropped.
That's a Pandora's box, whether someone has to finish their dinner. I've always been pick your battles, so I don't think there's a right answer on this one. I've always been pick your battles. I wouldn't make something extra or different, but that's what it is. If you've had enough and then I would say there's fruit. If you've had enough of dinner and you're hungry later, there's fruit. We're not really big dessert people anyway, but I never had it being a big thing. But I've got to tell you something funny that you reminded me of. We also weren't big on snacks in our house. There was fruit, and we were really lucky to have that. But my friend's mum used to say, save up your spit and drink that. that was how little snacks there were in her house, Yeah, that's pretty harsh. But, I know that for my journey on homeschooling, I mean, it might sound funny, but we always had a help yourself shelf. And that helped me because I never had to get, I'm hungry. I don't want to hear that. I have 5 children. I don't want to hear I'm hungry 5 times from 5 children. Help yourself shelf in the fridge. And it just meant it came down to planning. But I would get things like, a big thing of fruit, chopped up, a can of chopped up fruit salad or something. And I'd have little plastic containers. I'd put them all in. And this shelf was full of things that I wouldn't mind them eating. And the funny thing is, they generally developed habits of being able to regulate themselves because they knew it was there. So they weren't there every 5 minutes. So now I've got grandkids, and that's not saying they have in their house. And I'll say, here's your help yourself shelf. And I'll come back 5 minutes later, it's empty, because they haven't got into that habit. They're like, oh my goodness, there's all these things I can help myself. And so it does take time to train them to, I think just knowing it's always there. It's always healthy stuff, and it's not expensive. Not like, it can get really expensive if you've got all those, tubes of fruit and everything. They're really expensive. If you just get some bulk things, get some little containers that are washable, put it all in there, or Ziploc bags of carrot sticks or cucumber, that's what's to help yourself. And so it always looked like it was abundance, but it really wasn't very expensive. And they will learn. So, don't be discouraged that they are always hungry. But I bet you would say the same. Isn't it often that they're not hungry, but that they're stuck on something they're working on? Because that's what I do. I get stuck on something, I think I'm going to need some cup of tea or a piece of chocolate, because sometimes it's not they're hungry at all. So I suppose it's trying to identify that as well.
Yeah, and that's a big topic in itself. And I think the important part here to double tap on is when we talk about physical health and mental health, we're talking about, are you eating and giving your body the right fuel that is required for the said day ahead? If you're going to go run a marathon, you're going to have to preload with food and so on and so forth. And again, we might talk about it far more in depth. I might bust out some nutritional episodes. I think if we get enough thumbs up or anyone wants to hear about that, because this is the Future Learners podcast. Although nutrition for the brain is very, very important, which will definitely predict whether or not you're going to learn more, retain more, etc. So nutrition is important, and it comes back to, again, at the very least, know what food is going to be consumed within a day. Now, some parents, they have their entire weekly meal prep planned out, and we know what we're having. I mean, the funny part with me, and my mum did this just by proxy, is I could tell you that Tuesday was our sausages, mashed potato, and cabbage night. I could tell you our Wednesday was our homemade, I could go through our entire meal plan, right? And this is dating back decades. But having that predictability is one, again, it's going to remove a lot more decision making. It's going to remove any decision fatigue. That is a real thing. The reason why you just created a shelf where you're like, this is the anything shelf, because the amount of decisions, whilst small, can I have this? Can I have that? And you're like, yes, yes. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? No, you did this to me and I'm going to hold a grudge on you. No, you can't. Yes, you can. But he had it. Why can't he have it? What about? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm just done today. I've made too many decisions. So that's a real thing, decision fatigue. Even when you look at it, decision fatigue from what's my child going to wear today? What am I going to wear today? It's like, if you actually know what you're going to wear ahead of time, you don't need to decide. You're not like, should I wear this or wear this? So, well, I got 7 black t-shirts. I'm going to wear one of them. Like that's what it is. So anywhere where you can remove decision fatigue, it is healthy for your brain. Okay. That's one thing. And nutrition, again, we won't go into a masterclass on nutrition, but the crazy part is most people know what is good nutrition and bad nutrition, right? The good nutrition, again, is just making sure, how does your child react, or how does your child function when they eat certain types of foods, right? It's very well known that if you have a really high sugary breakfast, like you've got some Fruit Loops or Cocoa Pops or something of that nature, when you eat that, there is going to be a surge of energy because of the breakdown of the carbohydrates and the sugar, and then it's going to probably lead to a crash. That's why a lot of kids who have high cereal breakfasts, by the time 10 o'clock comes, they're sitting at their desk and they're really tired again, and they can't wait for lunch because they need more food and they want to get back involved in it. So knowing how your child reacts to food is very important on this journey as well, because it's not just how their body's going to physically operate. I mean, that's one thing. Longevity is very important. But it's how is it going to help them stay focused and remain focused? And it doesn't take much to get on Google and go, what brain foods are there? And actually, we should put this down as a bit of a thing, Ella. I think we should create like a nutrition sort of and a fitness guide that we can give families. I'd actually like to do that. Let's put that down as something to get done, because it is such an important topic, arguably the most important topic, to be fair, that just isn't discussed. So we're going to do something about that as well. But again, making sure that you can go to Google. What foods can my child consume that will help keep their brain with less brain fog, or what will give them higher focus? And it's not caffeine, obviously. Caffeine's not, it's okay for primary focus, but it's not good for obviously children and so forth. And if anything, again, I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole here of nutrition, but caffeine is feels good at the moment, but then there's always a decline after everything. Every type of food has a rise, and then there's a fall off the back end of it. There's a reason why when you go to a buffet, at the end of it, you're like, oh my God, I need to go home to bed, because your body needs to try and digest all of this food that you've just thrown down your throat. So food is one thing. Prep ahead. At the very least, know what you're having for the day. Okay? Know what you're having for the day. Involve your child in that, because what you're doing at a very early age is, if you're involving your child and talking to them about, oh, this is this food and this is what this food does for our body. One, you can learn it, but you're going to equip your child with such a stronger mindset and relationship with food that I guarantee you in their later years of their life is going to pay off dividends, because we live in a world now where there is crap food exposed to us all day, every day. And again, I put my hand up here. I eat some of it as well. And every so often I'll drive through that Macca's drive-through and get me a Big Mac and quarter pounder. And it's like, I get it. We are all humans, right? But again, within reason, and make sure that you're fully aware of that. But I just want to add that little bit there, as I challenge you as a parent. If you're like, I don't really know all the foods, here's an idea. How about you start learning, but involve your child with it? It's it'll be such an important thing, because if we carry on the way we're going in this day and age with, the food pyramid, we won't get into that. That's a natural disaster within itself, that we're led to believe that we should eat these types of foods. It's going to equip them with the knowledge to start making their own decisions, and they might be a little bit mindful when they're reaching for something or they're out somewhere and so forth. So nutrition, unbelievably important. Let's move on to the physical movement aspect as well. I think this is very important because unless you're a very active family intentionally and it's inbuilt into your DNA, it can be very hard. And we find there's many sedentary families and children, right? You get to the end of the day and you're like, if you don't have a fitness watch or something, you're like, I wonder how many steps I've done. Oh, geez, we've done 500 steps. That's not good. We want to be aiming for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 steps a day so we can actually move our body and so it can function and so forth. But it can happen, and I even share this with the team, is we can sit on a computer here and, again, we could be 7 hours in. I'm like, I've done like 30 steps to the door and back, to the door and back. And, I have not moved at all, and that's not good. That's what leads to, again, a lot more health and health issues. So let's talk about movement. How do you incorporate movement into homeschooling? What are some things that you've explored and tested and try and use?
Yeah, so look, we obviously, the Euka program has PDHP in it. So we do health and we also do PE in the week. So there's always going to be at least one day a week where you've already got something there for your child. And we always make sure that it's something that you could do in a backyard. And if worse comes to worse, even inside, it might be a circuit, that kind of thing. But get into it with your child because you want to feel as though you're getting some of that movement as well. And look, nothing beats let's go for a morning walk before we get started, or you know what, let's go lunchtime, let's go for a walk together, like those sorts of things, or go for a bike ride or something like that to clear the cobwebs after lunch. Those kinds of things you get to do. So they're actually a real treat when it comes to homeschooling, adding some of those physical things in. And it means it's something you can do yourself as well. So you're both benefiting from that.
Yeah, I'd love to get some feedback from you listening here. What plans you implement? Outside of we provide a PE session, etc. However, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The reality is we as people know we should be moving more, and there's a beautiful opportunity here to be able to incorporate that movement with your child. And you know what, you might go, you know what, on Wednesday we're just going to the park for half an hour, and that might just be it, right? They can run around like a headless chicken. But how do you involve yourself there as well? I'd love to know. So if you've got any feedback or any tips and tricks that you use, you want to share with us, make sure you comment there with that. So when it comes to, we've briefly touched on the nutritional aspect, we've briefly touched on the physical aspect. The main purpose of this episode is really to highlight the fact that we need to pay attention to it first and foremost. We'll go into a lot more deeper aspects of it, I think, in further episodes. But the last one again is to round it off is the mental health. Like, how are we mentally training ourselves? How are we giving ourselves, time and breadth to be able to, reset our mind and allow that decompression component. So what can you share, and what are some things that you've done and implemented again around that topic?
Yeah, look, Brett, I don't know if you remember last week when we were talking to Nina, a homeschool mum for many, many years. She did something that I also did, which is having some time, which is just some quiet time that's actually allocated to be quiet time. When they're teenagers, they might be doing their novel reading at that time. And when they're little and younger ones, you might say, here's a couple of things that you can do, even if it's just Lego, but it's just a quiet time. Doesn't have to be a still time. Because, just try that with Ayla, getting her to sit still, but just a quiet time, just yourself. I know a lot of classrooms at school now have like a reading corner, or they have a special little tent set up where it is for quiet time. So we really are starting to see that being valued even in the classroom, but you've got this opportunity at home. And sometimes you have to be purposeful, like we said, about saying, let's set a little bit of time apart from everybody else. Especially if you've got siblings, they need some time to themselves and to get away from each other so that they can show the love later. So if you're finding and I find structure on that one is really helpful. After lunch, a little bit of quiet time, and it can increase from very small, just be 5 minutes when they're smaller, or 10 minutes, up to, have an hour even. As a high schooler, that's your time to just go and chill out and do some things quietly that are not mentally straining things, and certainly not on the computer, just doing something quiet.
Yeah, right. Excellent. What would you say to someone who's like, my child just doesn't sit still long enough, so they might go, okay, I want quiet time. You can go jump on the computer console, go and play games for an hour. Now, that's obviously not quiet time to the child. It might be for you, and I understand sometimes a parent is just, you need to do what you got to do. But when you say quiet time, what do you refer to there per se? Like just any type of activity? Just
look, right from very little, I always had mine, and I would say they don't want to sit still because they're little, like they're 2 or 3. But at that point, I would say to them, we might only make it 2 minutes. Make it something that they can be successful at, an amount of time that they're successful at. And something quiet might be colouring in, might be looking through some books or something like that while they're little. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so if we look at that, I want to finish on a couple of other points that will be very helpful from a mental capacity there, or a mental health capacity. We talked about this in the previous episode, and these are sort of, as we start to unpack a lot of different tactics and ways of doing things, is they can all come together to create an end outcome. And we talked about setting up your day, right? Setting up your day is actually very good for the mental health because it gives clarity and it gives a horizon of what we're actually focusing on. And it gives someone a goal, right? We're very goal-oriented as human beings. As you set up a day, you go, here's the things that we're going to achieve. You talk about it, you provide clarity, it provides mental capacity and freedom within the mind. At the end of the day, you go back, you sit down, you assess that. And that's where you provide nice critique, nice feedback. Hey, well done. You're doing extremely well here. I loved how you did that. Hey, when you did quiet time today, thank you so much. That was amazing. How did you feel about that? Oh, it was really hard. Yeah, I know it's hard. It can be really hard, but it's, do you feel good after it now that you've been able to do that? And, oh, yeah, I do. So this is where the whole, outside of tactically sitting down, doing a meditation and being free and relaxing and doing all these other tactics, like the mental health aspect you'll find can be infused throughout and in our everyday and weekly sort of tasks. So, Ellen, with that, we have to wrap this episode up. I have to go and work on some very important, very exciting news that we're going to probably share with the Euka community in due time. But it's been amazing as always. If you have gotten value from this episode, I appreciate you sharing it with anyone that you believe will also get value as well. And as you know, please give us the 5 stars everywhere you can give us 5 stars. We appreciate you tuning in. And Ellen, I will speak to you very soon, but to our beautiful listener, we will see you on the next one.